misinformation is something which, in which wrong information is shared without intention, where in disinformation is with intention. But is it a viable distinction? How could we know that the information is shared with intention or not? If you need to decide on this, you have to onboard more experts in the team. Like you need to have a forensic expert, a polygraph expert, a psychologist, so on and so forth, to identify whether the information is shared is really without intention or with intention. That's why we call them misinformation. Because when we call misinformation, it means everything. So no matter what intention you have, it serves the same purpose. It does the same damage. That's why from the end points of view, from the consequential point of view, there is no distinction between mis and disinformation. So in our lab, we came to learn these things in our everyday affairs. So I work with misinformation 24/7 every day with my team. Now, I've been debunking misinformation while I was sitting here. Some request from some government people, some ministers, they're sharing with me some of the misclaims about them, and they said, please do something. This is something that we need to do, we are doing these days. So, and you, perhaps some of you know that there is a mass disinformation campaign after the uprising in Bangladesh, which has been running and was initiated by some BJP-led Indian media. So this is a serious problem for a small country like Bangladesh. No, so it's a kind of industrial scale disinformation running against a country, and the country is not really ready to tackle it. So everybody is panicked. What's been happening? So there has been a widespread news of minority persecution. So is it really happening here? There is a concern. It even confuses the liberal, left liberal, centrist, part of the population of South Asia in general, and in the West, not the least. So that is what brings me the context, the misinformation brings the information business more transnational. It's no longer within a national boundary. And if it comes to South Asia, when we have a shared history, shared geography, shared culture, so it's no longer to be bounded within the nation's boundary. It transcends. And that's what has brought us to explore the nature of the, transgression of misinformation within the broader South Asia, if not beyond. So that's why we call them nomadic narratives, they are roaming around, and you know where it goes, and you know when it pops up. So the research, actually I have a summary. Yeah, so I gave you the background, so perhaps I'll skip the slide. So this is one of the findings, but let me start with the findings because it will give you more context of what is the research about. Because when you hear all the research presentations, it comes with an introduction, literature review, research question. It gives the entire thing a boring presentation. So I thought give you some striking findings, then perhaps you will like it more. So this is an incident which was originated in Sri Lanka in 2019. It's a ragging incident, so I give you the video here.
Adik, adik. Adik, adik. Adik, saya enggak beda. Dek. Wali dah, dek. Era. Tidak. Dem.
Now, it's an Eastern University, Sri Lanka. We had to explore because when we received this video, the claim was something else. So, in 2019, the incident happened. The following year, in India, the same year actually, 2019, immediately after the incident, India says, some of the Indian media says that it is the RSS or Hindu nationalist groups that tortured Muslim women in India, not in Sri Lanka. So it was fact-checked. But fact-checking a content cannot kill it. That's what you can see it in next years. Like, in Pakistan, it has a context. So earlier, there was a kind of an interference of a helicopter of India in Pakistan, and they caught the helicopter and later released the helicopter as a friendly gesture. Okay? So it was a negotiation between India and Pakistan, and it made some of the Pakistani people very angry, and they actually spread this misinformation. They said, like, you showed them friendly gesture by releasing their helicopter, which was trespassing to Pakistan illegally. How about this Muslim women being harassed and tortured by Indian nationalist groups? Which is a lie, but it was believed by many Pakistanis and circulated. Now, it was debunked, fact-checked, and we thought it's gone. In 2020, so you perhaps remember the famous Muskan controversy in UP, the hijabi girl, so who actually fought for wearing hijab. So at that moment, this popped up again in Indian media, claiming that Hindu nationalist people are torturing Muslim women. Same content. In 2020 in Pakistan, the same content. But this time they said that it's happening in Sri Lanka. So after 2 years, again in Pakistan, say that it's a video of Muslim persecution in India by more extremist Hindu groups. Same video. And it traveled to Bangladesh. Sorry. And claiming that somebody was calling that, okay, please save our sisters of India. Now all blames went to India, while the original incident was from Sri Lanka. So this is how, all the findings actually gave us the clue that, things are traveling. So it comes from somewhere else, claim is something else, and it doesn't die. So that's what leads us to a research question. So in our research question was basically what are the major themes of diffusion, core characteristics, and types of transnational misinformation in South Asia? And how do socio-cultural tensions and social media platforms contribute to its persistence, mobility, and recurrence? Because when we was observing to these incidences, we saw that not only the socio-cultural, contextual backgrounds, but also the nature of social media being used has a huge role to play in the nature of recurring misinformations. Sorry. So the methodology was obvious. So we adopted qualitative research methods, content analysis, to be very specific. So we draw contents from fact-check reports from fact-checkers of Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, India, and cross-validated those reports with media personnel, civil society activists, human rights activists, fact-checkers, journalists of India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. So I came to Sri Lanka, and I came to Nepal 6 months before for this research, and talked to my fellow CMR people and others. I met many of you in those sessions, I remember. And the data that we actually took for this research was taken from 2017 to 2024. So I'll be just brief about the findings because I don't have much time. So just in 10 minutes, I'll give you some brief ideas about. So what we have found, we divided it into 3 categories. One is core characteristics, another one is deceptive tactics and techniques, another one is dominant themes of diffusion. So core characteristics, by core characteristics, we actually meant, how cross-border amplification and transnational diffusion take place. And what is the nature of cyclical resurfacing of misinformation. So we try to identify some patterns in those cyclical resurfacing. And how these cyclical circulation of misinformation are manipulating existing political or social tensions, and how this targets particular community, particularly minority community in those countries. So this is something that we found. And the tactics, actually, we saw tactics means the way they manipulate misinformations. The most common tactic is decontextualization. So they don't entirely make up anything. I mean, they do that rarely, but the most common is taking a picture which is true, but use it in a different context. Like this one. The video is true. It's not a made-up video, right? But the meaning was different. When it is circulated, they change the meaning. We call it decontextualization. So they decontextualize the meaning with videos, with photos, even with headlines, all those fabricated narratives is another one. Fabricated narratives means entirely made up narratives which doesn't exist. Sometimes they manipulate visual content like, use, of course, artificial intelligence has still been a minimal use in South Asia because it needs a huge investment. So our misinformation producers still do not find much incentives to produce misinformation. I guess that they will do so in the upcoming election of India, perhaps. In last Bangladeshi election, we feared that artificial intelligence will be of a greater use. And all the social media giants like Facebook, YouTube was worried that there will be a surge of artificial intelligence. And we work with Facebook as a partner, and they warned us several times. We had several meetings with Facebook, how to tackle artificial intelligence. So we are prepared with whatever we had. But in the final game, no artificial intelligence. You know why? Because the election results was rigged, predetermined. We knew that who will win in the election. if the result is known, there is no point of investing so much on artificial intelligence. So that we had a research like this, and then we concluded that in a more democracy, there are more chances of facing more misinformation. Ironical, but true. In a repressive regime, you see less misinformation than in a democratic regime. So this is the irony that we face. And of course, there are conspiracy theories which cannot be proved or unproved. This is a real problem globally. Now the disinformation campaign we see happening in India regarding Bangladesh's rising of militancy and so on and so forth, or they have claims about China, about Myanmar, or Bangladesh's claim about India or Sri Lanka. Many of the claims are conspiracy theories. And the problem with conspiracy theory is that you can't do anything, because you can't prove it, and you can't unprove it as well. So this is a problem that we see, and those are very popular because those cannot be rated on social media, so they remain on social media. Okay. And the themes that actually we found is the most dominant theme is religious theme, religious tensions. And of course, emergency and disaster is another thing. Particularly, there are a lot of contents that we receive from Nepal. Those are related with emergency and disaster, particularly earthquake, landslides. So we saw many graphic videos claiming that landslide is happening in any of the Bangladeshi districts, but it is actually from Nepal. So this is something that actually happening. And food contamination and health, it happened during COVID period. A lot of health misinformation was circulating, and interstate tensions between, so what's happening, tension between Bangladesh and Pakistan, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, Nepal and India. So it's a very, and okay, so I'm not going into detail of all those things, so I told you these. So I give you another case, perhaps two cases. So let me talk about this. So when it comes to religious tensions, you see, so there is a huge misinformation sourced from Bangladesh going to India, targeting India, claiming that of Hindu victimization. So a lot of content from Bangladesh has been circulating in India, claiming that there has been a case of Hindu victimization in Bangladesh happening. And similar thing traveling to Pakistan and claiming that Muslim victimization is happening in India. And are you aware of the concept of love jihad? Love jihad is a very interesting conspiracy theory. So it claims that a Muslim actually, have a love affair with a Hindu girl and marries and converted her to Islam, and this is actually jihad, the part of a jihad. They call it love jihad. And the BJP regime in India has been very vocal about love jihad is happening in UP, in Haryana, in many other places. And some of the Indian researchers actually wrote several articles on love jihad and proved that it is just a conspiracy theory. It cannot be proved that similar thing happens in India. There are cases like, Shah Rukh Khan marries, Gauri Khan, right? Is it a love jihad? So inter-religious marriage are randomly called as love jihad. And this is a real problem for the couple, because they'll have to live in a community after the marriage. And if you call it love jihad, then definitely they are subject to intimidation, harassment, and definitely it makes their life very difficult. And that's what makes many of them to take a conspiratory measure. They call it reverse love jihad. You see, the fight in the air, love jihad is not true, reverse love jihad is not true. But the claim is there. What is reverse love jihad? It's the Hindus themselves, they marry Muslim women in revenge of love jihad. And they call, by doing so, they actually reverse love jihad. So this is what's been happening, not in the ground, because we don't know what's been happening in the ground. The research cannot prove it. There are several research, investigative journalism happening in these topics, but nobody proved that it's real happened. But it's in the context, it's in social media, in the discourse, it's in the discussion. Love jihad, reverse love jihad, always there. So emergency and disaster is another thing that, the themes are floods, landslide, plane crash, of course coming from Nepal. So there are a lot of plane crash video we see, claiming that it's happened in some of the towns of Bangladesh, but originally it was from Nepal or somewhere else. COVID-19, traveling from Bangladesh to Nepal probably, or India to Nepal. So, there are directions. And when you see food contamination, I'm not going into detail, but just look at the complex structure of the traveling paths, and you see, you can easily guess who is the major hub of misinformation, major junction of misinformation. Of course, the biggest country in South Asia. You see how many lines are coming from India. So that's the junction. And you see the colors will tell you the story. And perhaps China, of course, China doesn't belong to South Asia, but it belongs to the misinformation domain of South Asia. China has a major stakeholder in South Asian misinformation, because there is a myth of plastic rice, plastic eggs circulating all over in Bangladesh and India. The concept coming from China. The claim actually, they claim that plastic rice has been imported from China. So nobody is asking that whether making plastic rice is really price worthy. But the claim is there, because we believe that Chinese people can do anything. They can produce anything, even plastic rice, right? So I give you another example and I'll close my deliberation. It's an interesting example of a cake. They call it lupu cake, perhaps many of you know. So there is an interesting circulation of misinformation we identified around lupu cakes. So the initial circulation, so they actually, the initial claim was that there is pills inside in the cake. They put pills. What kind of pills? In 2019, you see, they called that, it was circulated in Europe. They called that in lupu cakes, there are paralyzing pills. You take the cake, you eat the cake, it will paralyze you. So don't take the cake. So the issue was health. So you see how we categorized it. So that time the issue was only health issue, health misinformation. Perhaps there was no angle. So we couldn't find any communal angle or any racial angle in 2019. But later on, in 2019, it traveled to US and Mexico. And that time, they claimed that paralyzing pills in Turkish cake. And now you see the angle. Turkish cake means a Muslim country, right? So the religious tension, so added flavor. So in US and in Mexico, so that was the narrative. In 2020, it came to India. And the cake is no longer a Turkish cake. It's become a Chinese cake. And they say that the paralyzing pills are in Chinese cake. So don't take Chinese cake. So now the theme is interstate tensions and religious tensions. Now, India, India has problems with Chinese people. Some of the Indians have problems with Pakistan. So now it gets dimensions. Now the narrative is in 2021, Muslims selling cakes laced with importance pills to Hindu children. So from paralyzing to importance. So you see the health narrative changed and the religious narrative changed. So we see still religious tensions, and the logos are basically down there are the circulating platforms. So now it goes to X handles. Earlier it was on YouTube, Facebook, and now it's in X handles. In 2022, it traveled to India and Sri Lanka again, and it calls the Turkish cakes with paralyzing pills for children. It's again, Turkish cake. So the Muslim angle comes again. In 2023, it traveled to Pakistan. And there the claim is the minorities selling cakes spiked with pills to sterilize Muslim children. They are blaming to Hindus that. Now Hindus are selling cakes so that Muslims become paralyzed. So this is how the entire complex scenario has been happening, and all of the informations are using a similar technique of decontextualization of something like a cake, for that matter here. And in different times, it gets different agencies, it circulates different themes and serves different purposes. So, this is some of the cases that we came up in our research. There are many other interesting cases, and there are many other categories, so I'm just giving you the glimpse. So, finally, that we actually came up with some policy recommendations. Earlier, it was like, we tackle misinformation on a national level, and we found that it's not really actually practical, because how could I know that something is circulating in Nepalese language in Nepal? So I'll not be able to debunk that something wrong has been circulating about Bangladesh in Nepal, because I don't know the language. So that's why we actually proposed a regional body which could look into this, the regional circulation of misinformation. And there is a body actually. We know that we have a SARC. Although SARC is struggling in coma, but if we can revive SARC, there is a body in SARC Information Forum where we can actually revive the entire thing and collaboration between South Asian countries. And definitely we have our own collaborations between CSOs, fact checkers of South Asia. And if we can formalize it, because informally we are together, we always talk to each other, join conferences here, South Asia or beyond, and we often participate in online conferences in many places. But at some point, we need to formalize it somewhere, at CSO level or at the government level. Otherwise, we will not be able to actually tackle the regionally circulating misinformation. So that's what we proposed in our research. Thank you for listening, and if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Sumon, Professor Sumon, for your wonderful presentation based on the research. You mentioned that how misinformed travels from religion to rice to medicine. In different cases were interesting for all of us. Now I would like to request Sohail Granji for the presentation. As Sumon told, now if time allow us, we'll take some questions for the research. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Sohail Granji. I will be presenting a paper on disinformation in international relations, impact on Nepal's relation with India and China. The PPT is not working right here.
Something technical problem happened. Misinformation gives more money. Previously, Professor Kharils would say, if there is any most expensive currency that is conflict, he would say conflict is the most expensive currency. It cannot be compared with dollar, euros, or pound sterlings. Now misinformation, it is taking over time. So I ready? Yes, thank you.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the age of misinformation and disinformation. Actually, in international relations and diplomacy, we talk about power. And in today's era, only the economy and military is not the power. Those who have information, they rule the international relations and diplomacy. While I was studying journalism in this department, I hardly know about propaganda. But when I shift to international relations and diplomacy, I get more clues about the contents that harm the diplomacy and relations between the states. So I will not go through the theoretical aspects of misinformation, disinformation, or anything else, because the former presenter has already told many things about that. So I would like to begin with a recent phenomena. Dr. Arjuna Deva is in India, or I think she's back. Nepali media write that she could not meet anyone in the India, not Jaishankar, not Ajit Doval, not PM Modi. But when she was in India before, the same Nepali media, right there, she get treated as a prime minister. This is the false narrative of Nepali media that harms the national sovereignty of the state. Talking about journalism, it is the headline for media that she didn't meet anyone. But for international relations and diplomacy and a student of that subject, it is the threat to the national sovereignty. Because the same headline is misleading the public opinion, and it is saying that all the politics is misguided by India. So, false and misleading narratives can have profound impact on various aspects in diplomatic relations, public opinion, majorly national security, which we hardly talk about in recent, and international cooperation, and fuel conflict and instability. While the SOR was talking about love jihad recently, I was also sourcing love jihad in Nepal. And Indian media has published few reports regarding love jihad in Nepal. So that is also a disinformation campaign, cross-border disinformation campaign that SOR has already stated. And in international relations, the actors of disinformation are mainly the foreign states and state-sponsored media. And recently, the non-state actors are more influential in disseminating the disinformation in international relations. I will give example later on for that. So, the Sanchen and Home has written a chapter in the book, and they have discussed 3 aspects of diplomacy that is being impacted by the disinformation. That is political, multilateral, and diplomatic culture. In politics, it weakens the trust between the partners by eroding credibility. And in multilateral level, it erodes the consensus and freedom of expression and normative power of the states. And in diplomatic culture, it shifts diplomacy from private discussions to public forums, causing discomfort. The last part is more important in the context of Nepal. We talk about MCC, we talk about BRI, we talk about many other multilateral, bilateral agreements that should be discussed in the political level. But we bring that to the public level and the lowest level, which cause discomfort in diplomacy. Because you can deal with the diplomats, but you cannot deal with the public every time. So these are some newspapers, cuttings, and fake news posters. Many of you, us, have read that War of Worlds in journalism books, how that got panic to the people by radio broadcasting. There is a cutting of that. And last one, the victory speech of Imran Khan, that is of deep fake video. These are some examples of it. So it's a definition, so I won't go there. So Nepal and India. The misinformation and disinformation campaign is not a new thing for Nepal-India relation. If we see the Hrithik Roshan incident, that was merely disinformation that caused chaos between the people of 2 countries. And the opposite is in earthquake time, when Go Back in India was highlighted in Nepal. It is all because of the false narratives that have challenged the relationship between 2 states. The disinformation campaigns has not only increased distrust, it has harmed the ground level reality of the people. recently, there was a SAF Women Championship final between India and Nepal. And there was lots of discussions regarding that. While that was only headline for the media, but for international relations, that is the public opinion that matters the most. If you see the social media, you can see that many people backlash Indian state, for bribing the referee. Doesn't Modi have any other work to do? He has many other works to do. So misleading headlines are distorting the era-long culture and religious relationship between the states, which are not an academic resource still in Nepal. So there are many causes of misinformation or disinformation between India and Nepal. Some are land border disputes, Indian interference in internal affairs, and everything is political. What happens in Nepal, in Nepali political arena, that is guided by India. That narrative of media is too harmful for the diplomatic achievements or any other thing. And post-truth politics. The post-truth politics is like beyond the truth. You do not accept the truth, you do not accept the fact. You just accept what you want to listen or what you want to hear. It is like a populism. So because of the disinformation and misinformation campaign, the post-truth politics is really increasing in Nepal. You can take name of India and China and say anything, and people will believe you. And what are the effects? Obviously, the anti-Indian sentiments that I have already said, and that is also an issue of cricket that we have recently seen in the nearby cricket stadium. And we cannot solve the issues very peacefully. And that has also discouraged investment from India as well. And more importantly, distrust and animosity has been fueled by the false narratives in the ground level, not in the political level, but in the ground level. And hate speech in social media is in high rate. That is very challenging us to maintain that. So these are some cuttings, and these are the disinformation created in Indian media. You can see about Hindutva or China debt trap or BRI or Oli and former ambassador to China and Oli's corruption case. These all are disinformations. So are these only headlines for us? For media student, these are only headlines. But for me or a media or international student, these are a threat to national sovereignty of Nepal. Because it saves the public opinion that all things are guided by India and all politicians are guided by India. And it has increased the anti-Indian sentiment in Nepal. And I already told that, the rise of post-truth politics. And most importantly, the polarization of this society is in high rate. And Hindutva factor, and it has also impacted the relation with China. Recently, this former RAW agent interview was very highlighted in Nepali media. Who is he? Is he a trustworthy news source? I think no. But major mainstream media also take quote from him and say that Oli ko sarkar ab ek mahina mein dalch. Doesn't the news reporters of the newsroom know that how the government function of the Nepal? They know that. But they present that the government will be down by saying the RAW agent. It is not the news that will be sold or published in the main news media. But for newsroom, it is headline, clickbait. So it harms public opinion. And Similarly, there is misinformation and disinformation regarding India and China. And it is like same, but regarding Nepal and China, it has increased distrust in the public. And there is difficulty in resolving peacefully issues also. And jeopardizing important projects like BRI projects. These all things are impacted by the misinformation and disinformations. The above quoting is the above two quotings are from is from Global Times and added from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. While the Congress leader told that India has China's position regarding the land and foreign ministry land. And second one is the Prasanda is saying that मलाई प्रधानमन्त्रीले बनाउन मलाई जति पनि दिल्ली गइरहेको छ भनेर. And the last one is from Balin. His 3-4 posts are really post-truth politics, which harms the public opinion and is not good for the diplomatic efforts. And the last one is Nepalमा चीन कता छ र जताततै भारत देख्छु. It is good for headline. It is really good for headline. But should ambassador speak like this regarding the diplomacy or regarding another nation? No. And should media make it headline? The main question is like that. Why the media is making that headline? It should be a researchable question. So disinformation in Nepali media. That is also a threat to national security. I am majorly focusing in national security because public opinion, the harm that creates public opinion is certainly hampering the national security of the state. So Nepal has been the playground of disinformation from both China and India. And Nepali media is also playing a role in it, and it is not countering it. So it is the main thrust of the research that 3 aspects are mostly impacted by the disinformation in Nepal. The first one is public opinion, the rise in anti-India sentiment, distrust in China, post-truth politics, mass panic, and false social media narrative and popular media narrative that I recently saw the headlines. And second one is national security. There is the polarization, social unrest. We can see news regarding Muslims community, Hindutva community. These all are the national security challenges that we are seeing because of the public opinion that is being shaped by the misinformation and disinformation and post-truth politics. And major is compromised cybersecurity. We don't have a proper cybersecurity plan regarding the national interest or national security. And there are other like threat to sovereignty and political instability as well. And third one is diplomatic hindrance. When there is no goodwill in public, and where there is lack of national security, then there cannot be the trust and cooperation in bilateral issues. It will certainly harm the diplomatic efforts and escalate disharmony in bilateral relation and dilute negotiation and public backlash. Talking about BRI, whether only in China signed framework or not, public will backlash it. So, how that ground matters because of the public opinion that is shaped before he went there. So there is no countermeasures to counter that disinformation. So how to counter disinformation is or will real news come back? It is really hard now. Because in social media, you can write anything and you can say anything. And there is no policy regarding countermeasure to it. So main things is media literacy, fact-checking initiatives, transparent communication between India and China, and so as I recently said, the SARC, we can also use that channel too, and strengthening diplomatic channels, regulate social media platforms, dedicated unit to counter disinformation, strengthen cybersecurity, foster public diplomacy, and main importantly, it is important to read foreign policy of Nepal before you write any news, for me at least, now. Because if you don't know the foreign policy of Nepal, and you are writing everything in the paper, you are harming the national interest of the nation. And you are shaping public opinion very, very differently, which is really, really not incorrect. But you can be critic. Newspapers must be critic of foreign policy, but you cannot be fool, or you cannot make fool to the people that will harm the national security of the state. So thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Saik. He states that media narratives create problems in diplomacy. And thank you very much, because tomorrow, he's just informed that tomorrow is MPhil Viva thesis, okay? He was quite stressed over there, that is why. But and thank you for your effort. Now I request Sunil for your presentation, please. Okay, Sunil?
Namaste and good afternoon all. I would firstly like to thank to TUCD JMC and CMR for providing us this opportunity to present our small work. I want to say it is small because we hurriedly did it to present today. And I'm going today to present a research. The title of my research is Bias in Newspaper and Readers' Perception on Media Literacy. As media literacy is one of the most prominent and importantly discussed matter, and newspaper cover biased news, we usually say, and many studies show that too. And it is globally accepted that negativity makes money more. Media spread negativity, and negative news have great importance because of the sale of media and magnitude as well. So, let's begin. As I already mentioned, this is a study on positive and negative news bias in Nepali national dailies. I have selected 7 daily newspapers to analyze the content published on their first pages. And I have also done survey with questionnaires to find out the perception of readers. And also I have discussed with 5 regular newspaper readers as focal group discussion, and I have taken key informant interviews with 10 respondents as well. I don't want to go through all the procedures of abstract and other things as our professor from Bangladesh already mentioned. But I want to say the study, though it is not that a big important, but the topic I have chosen should be researched rigorously, I think, because if people do not have the capacity to find out the bias, and if media stay covering the biased news, then, as it is already mentioned, misinformation, disinformation, etc. Spread a lot in the society, and society becomes, according to my study, negatively biased many more. These are the key words which I have gone through. And to show the importance of my research, here are some popularly spreading scholarly quotes. Whether or not the world really is getting worse, the nature of news will make us think that it is. It was reported by The Guardian in 2023. And there is another quote, the media exaggerates negative news. This distortion has consequences. It is the saying of Steven Pinker in 2018. And to counter the negativity bias in media literacy is important, and there is another saying about media literacy. Media literacy is not just important, it's absolutely critical. It's going to make the difference between whether kids are a tool of the mass media or whether the mass media is a tool for the kids to use. It shows the importance of media literacy in nowadays scenario. And the literature of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. That also emphasizes the importance of media literacy. I'm not going to the introduction as I already mentioned. Statement of the problem also is somehow mentioned. I focused mainly in 4 questions as research question for my study. Whether the Nepali national dailies are spreading the negativity bias or not, if yes, to what extent? How do Nepali newspaper readers perceive the news? Do the readers think the Nepali national dailies are disseminating negative, positive, or the neutral news? The third question, what kind of newsworthy information are being prioritized by Nepali national dailies? As I already mentioned, I have gone through the content analysis of front pages of 7 national dailies. What is the status of newspaper materials' impact in influencing the reader's sentiment and societal attitude? And to answer these questions, the objectives were set as to perceive the news of Nepali national dailies as positive, negative, or neutral, finding out the news priority of Nepali national daily newspapers, observe and examine whether they are negatively or positively biased, find and provide the needed solution to media for maintaining neutrality. Hypothesis also is not that much necessary to mention here, as I have the limited time frame. To discuss about the limitation of the study, I already mentioned I got a very short period of time to do my research. So I have analyzed the content published in the front page of 7 national dailies. I'll mention the name in data presentation. I did it from December 10 to 16. Being at Press Council Nepal, I got the data. And to determine the news either as positive or negative, there are so many indicating factors, indicators. So while doing this research, I was many times confused either to select the news as positive or negative. So it was a little bit hard for me also. And sample size, as I already mentioned, I have made the filling up of Google form to 56 respondents in survey, and then 10 for key informant interviews and 5 for focal group discussion, and 7 front page of 7 dailies were analyzed. So all the respondents and content were gathered from Kathmandu Valley. While doing this research, I had been based on some theoretical framework like agenda setting, and along with agenda setting, framing and priming as well. And by the content given through news media, the society is constructed by shaping the public opinion. So that theory also was in my mind while doing this research. While doing this research, and I went through some literatures, I mainly focused on role of media, media literacy, selective gatekeeping, impact of negative news, and research finding on bias. That is, I think, very long, so I'm skipping this. There are so many factors to determine the news bias, as I already said. Newspaper spread the biased news either positive or negative for many reasons, like business interest, political and commercial influence, ideological support, professional standards and ethics, social, cultural impact, etc. And while I was going through the research, and I had to categorize the news into either positive, negative, or neutral, positively biased, negatively biased, or as neutral, I selected some indicators like selection and placement of stories, omission of facts, source reliance, language and tone, frame and angle. And to do this, I found it very difficult because while I searched on Google and other platforms, but could not find what are the exact determining factor or exact indicator to categorize the news as positive or negative. But fear.com, this is a New York-based American National Progressive Media Watchdog group. It was running since 1986, and I became based on it to find the indicators. I have already mentioned the indicators which I have set to categorize the news. And while doing the content analysis of the newspapers, this is my finding which is being displayed. I got in 7 days in 7 newspapers total 222 news items in the front page. Among them, 61 news or 27.48% only were positively angled or were presented positively as per the indicators, and 127 news or 57.21% of the news were negatively published, and 34 news, that is 15.32, were as neutral. And Naya Patrika, 75% negative, 16.67% positive, and 8.33% neutral. Likewise, Gorkha Patra, 50 positive, 50% positive, 29.41% negative, 20.59% neutral. Annapurna Post, 57.58% negative, 27.27% positive, 15.15% neutral. Rajdhani, 44.44% positive, 27.78% negative, 27.78% neutral. Kantipur, 61.90% negative, 28.57 positive, 9.52 neutral. Nagarik, 55% negative, 27.50 positive, and 17.50 neutral. Nepal Samachar Patra, this was the most negatively presenting newspaper, broadsheet, as I found in those 7 days. 78.57% of the news were negatively presented, and 7.14% only were presented positively, and 14.29 seem to be neutral. So, as findings, predominance of negative articles suggest a critical reporting tone. And it is true that journalism itself is a critical profession, and obviously negative news get the greater space. But while I found this data, being critical also has crossed some sort of limit, as I found. Lower positive coverage indicates a possible neglect of achievement and contribution. Then there are so many positive happenings in the society also, but media and journalists are being focused to spread the negative news, prioritizing the negativity. So I felt like that. Imbalance in coverage can influence public perception and reinforce negative stereotypes. When I am seeing Lekhna sir and Kundan sir also is here, Rishikesh sir who taught me journalism. We should make, while teaching me journalism, they had said us that we should make the balance of negative and positive tone in presentation. But these days, newspaper are not doing so. And this data also seems to be very long. These are the findings of questionnaire. It will take time, so I'm not going to read all this. I'll read only the key findings. After the survey and making the respondent fill up the questionnaire, and I observed the answer, I found the following key findings. Reading frequency, majority read newspaper daily, indicating high audience engagement. Perception of news bias, higher perception of negative bias than positive. Politics is perceived as the most biased topic. Bias identification methods, common methods analyzing viewpoint, language, and source indicates considerable media literacy among readers. We said Nepali newspaper readers lack media literacy, but as I found, people have adequate literacy to find out the bias, positivity, either is or negativity. They can easily find this is the negative tone being presented by the newspaper, and this is the positive tone. Readers are these days seem to be more literate for perceiving the tone of the news. Confidence in recognizing bias. Many express confidence in identifying bias, showing a critical approach to news consumption. As I already mentioned, majority believe news coverage negatively impacts public opinion, and it is true too. If we always spread the negativity, then the mindset of the people also gradually becomes negative. Many psychologists also have said this. And need for media literacy. While responding to my questions, they called for the need of media literacy. Neutrality and fairness is the must in journalistic profession. So, as conclusion, perception of bias, significant bias perceived, especially in political reporting. Need for media literacy, strengthening media literacy is crucial for critical evaluation of news content. Confidence levels also was seen in the respondents, that means the readers of the newspaper. And they also expressed the need for fair reporting. And promotion of media literacy is always a must. That is also reflected in the research. I already mentioned it is not that much a big work I could make, but the issue raised should be discussed more in the society, because further research also are needed to go through thoroughly about the situation. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunil, for your good study. I suggest you, there was a study, I think the title is The Grim Face of Newspapers, a study of negativity on the front page of Nepali National Dailies. It has already, you can find online. It is done by Ujjwal, Tilakji, and Bhuvanji. And they have detailed descriptions with methodological ideas alongside with the um, variables they have used. That will be very helpful for you, even if you wish to expand your research further. Lots of papers we discussed about the international relation and the media presence, social media misinformation travels faster than the real one. We are facing the situation over here. On this regard, I also have done research of baseline of misinformation in Nepal with the support of IRI, International Republic Institute, and there are some certain points that identified. I would like to share with you that majority in Nepal, there are who creates misinformation, or would transfer misinformation, for what purpose? On this regard, there are threat actors. Basically, it is identified that political parties or the leader or the political campaigns are identified as the threat actor to create misinformation, and two leaders of the major political parties, Nepali Congress and CPN UML, the prominent leaders agreed that the origin of misinformation belongs to the political leader and political parties in Nepal. If you cannot clean them, you cannot stop the misinformation. They agreed on that. As a threat actor, extremist group, religious extremist groups are very few in Nepal. That is very minimal, lies to the Tarai region bordering with India. And yes, of course, as Shoaib discussed, geopolitical informations that are frequently the information regarding geopolitical issues as a misinformation travels very faster in Nepal. The term nationalism and political parties try to play with it to create their popularity. It has been viewed in elections too. And even local governments, or state governments and the federal governments also create misinformation to establish their agenda. Not only that, to take credit for good things and discredit to others. They misinform. Similarly, commercial actors are found to be the threat actor for misinformation, especially advertisements, advertisings, and their contents are creating misinformation. And last not the least, the non-independent media. Basically, Nepali media is divided. Nepali news, even journalists are divided with different political ideologies, and they are one of the major catalysts to disseminate misinformation in Nepal through their news media. Now, when we discuss about the media freedom, it is said that journalists are highly literate people, they never do wrong. But now, sometimes they do right. Basically, intentionally they disseminate this kind of misinformation to gain their popularity or to discredit others. And there is a limited of hate speech in Nepal. We found very rare. There are certain cases we can find, but that is not in large scale. And the political, even when a political leader is unable to deliver his duties, they try to discredit media and media persons. Now, we widely listen Bara Bhai in Nepali. If that journalist, even a sports journalist is categorized as Bara Bhai in Nepal, it is because of the politicians' narrations that they discredit media and try to save themselves. Basically, as a tactic, it is found that lots of fake accounts are being in operation by different groups to disseminate this kind of information. Recently, artificial intelligence. Recently, we have discussed after 5 years whether we will be discussing about misinformation or not. Definitely, we will not discussing about misinformation. Definitely, it will take over by AI or something else. No? And manipulation, as all presenters discussed, manipulation is one of the tactics that threat actors playing. To combat this situation, what should be done? Basically, from the perspective of media, the research suggests that media should be proactive to combat misinformation. Otherwise, traditional media will be media will not survive with the new social media or other media or AI generated media. And fact-checking units should be incorporated within the newsroom. And social media with support of social media. Without support of social media, we cannot fight with the misinformation. That is why to make them accountable, we cannot ignore them. And at the last, civil society and citizens, if they are not informed properly what is news and what is information and what is news, there is a yearly differences in these days. On that context, if we work for the media literacy, we can change the scenario that our study explains. Thank you for listening us. If you have any one or two questions, one begin. Viganji, then Lehnat, and Umestin, just Tinta Matrai. Yes, thank you. We only have 3 questions. Because lunch is almost ready and we are already late. That is why only 3 questions we are taking.
Hello. Okay. Thank you. My question is for Sumon. Thank you for your very insightful presentations. So, particularly, would you please also enlighten us on some methodological aspects? For example, a few questions that came to my mind were, how did you select the content that has the misinformations? For example, whether you looked at the circulation matrix or you have some purposive sampling in terms of the selection of the news platform, or you used your own subjective judgment, or what was the criteria of the selection of the news content? Thank you.
Leknath ji, Leknath sir.
Shall I take one first, or
I think
we can take
all questions will be centered to you. That is why.
Hello, this is Leknath Pandey. I have no question at all, but I have a minor observation about regarding the presentation of Sayog Ranjit. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. But you mentioned while delivering your lecture, presentation, you said that there is an anti-India sentiment. I sense that there is no anti-India sentiment in Nepal, but I guess there is an anti-India establishment sentiment in Nepal. Due to their activities, we we perceive that we have anti-India sentiment. That is wrong for our bilateral relations as well as if we repeat that sort of things, again we are reinforcing the idea that the negative narratives, which definitely hampers our bilateral ties. Thank you.
Thank you, Leknath sir. Umesh, last question, Umesh Pokhrel.
Hello, namaste. It's me, Umesh Pokhrel. I'm media student. I have a question to Professor Sumon. Actually, thank you for your wonderful presentation, and you covered many things. One thing I would like to know from your presentation, I want to know more additional thing is that, you said that most of the information, the misinformation, malinformation is intentional. So can you please tell us that what are the purposes of the malinformation or misinformation? Can you please provide us the list from your presentation? That is my question for you. And another question for Sumanji. Can you please provide us some indicators that help you to determine this particular news is negative, a particular news is positive, or some news is neutral? So can you please provide more detail on that? Thank you.
I think Sumon insert.
Sure.
Yeah, we already covered.
Thank you very much for asking the methodology question. Basically, we did purposive sampling. So in that case, our rationale was we took fact-checking reports from all over South Asia from fact-checkers, recognized fact-checkers. So there are many fact-checkers. So we took fact-checking reports from within South Asia of fact-checkers. Those are accredited by International Fact-Checking Network, IFCN, right? So this is one criteria. Number two is to select viral content. We used an internal database of Meta called Meta Content Library, MCL. So MCL provides us a lot of viral misinformation across Bangladesh and India. And for Nepal and Sri Lanka, we actually worked with our research assistants at CMR and at SLPI, Sri Lanka Press Institute, who worked in a similar vein. So they actually used CrowdTangle, a software, to look at the viral misinformation in Sri Lanka, in Nepal, and they listed them for us. And we also used our research assistant in Nepal and Sri Lanka to find out fact-checking reports in local languages. So altogether, this is the method that we employed for our research. Okay. Another question was directed by this person. So should I take it or? Purposive sampling. I mean, I took a purpose of?
I think it was for Sunil. There were two Sunil. Sunil, certainly videos. Okay.
Thanks for the question. Thank you very much for the question. And I already mentioned while I was presenting, it was very difficult to set the indicators, either to categorize the news into positive or negative bias. So I followed fair.org. While I searched for setting the indicators, then I found it and I followed it. Fair.org, American organization that is the media watchdog, and it's set to set selection and placement of stories, language and tone, frame and angle, journalistic integrity, and possible influence in emotional tendency of the readers. These were the indicators to categorize the news as negative and positive. Thank you very much.
I think I have one more
Okay.
Give you just 1 minute response. It's basically, as students of misinformation and malinformation, we have this traditional distinction between misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, right? So basically, what we did, we problematized the definition, because how could we be sure that the information has been shared with intention? So, say for example, I shared an information which is a false information, hate narrative about anything. And you ask me, why did you share that? And I said, I shared it because this is shared by this professor. I trusted him. So basically, it cannot be proved. That's why this distinction between mis and disinformation has lost its academic currency. It's no longer in the academic domain right now. So somebody called them all along misinformation. Some says mis/disinformation together. And malinformation is something else, it's the true information actually consciously circulated to malign something, right? So that's the different thing. But mis and dis is a problem. That's why I problematize the definition in my discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all for your presentation. And thank you all for listening and your queries. Lastly, I would like to request Dr. Kundana Rial to present the certificate of this event to the Dr. Shonil. Thank you. For Shunil Paudel. Sayog Ranjit.